What bothers me is my opponent makes much of this notion that she'd be independent, she'll stand up to these special interests and everything else. And at the same time, my wife's a Democrat, so I get these mailers in my mailbox. We've gotten 3 from one union. And I pay for my own mailings out of contributions that I raise one at a time. Each mailing represents dozens and dozens of contributions, so I know what they cost. We're talking about, she's received three mailers by one union and one by a PAC. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of a value of $20,000, which matches or exceeds the amount of money that she herself has raised and spent on her campaign. So, to my mind, you can't sit there and say, I'm going to be independent, and yet go by the playbook, take these massive contributions. They're not in her campaign finance report, by the way, which was filed yesterday, and they're not required to be. We got this crazy quirk in our elections law, and I don't think it's any mystery how it got there, but the unions and PACs don't have to report their expenditures until after the election, and isn't that nice? But she just, in an article in the Milford Daily News today, said, set herself up as kind of the David to the Goliath of my spending, but made no mention of the fact that unions and PACs have spent money on her behalf in excess of what she spent for herself. So in a very real sense, the majority of her campaign is being funded by unions and special interests. And these unions require the filling out of a questionnaire in order to get an endorsement. And that questionnaire isn't just, how would you solve this problem, or what do you see as the biggest issues facing whatever. It's issue commitments. You need to support their agenda in order to get the endorsement. And last time we were in this room, I asked Carolyn, would she release the questionnaire she filled out for the MTA? She said she would. She said she cared about transparency, and to my knowledge, she hasn't. I certainly haven't seen it. But I'd now ask, will she release both the questionnaire and the monetary value of the mailings that they've put in for her? Because she said she's committed to transparency. It's important for the voters to know what is she committing for these massive outlays.
Obviously, she wants to respond to that right here, right now.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of questions in there, and I want to respond to all of them.
Take your time.
First of all, I'm extremely pleased to have the support of teachers in this district. From the very beginning, education has been an extremely important issue for me. I've got 3 children in the public school system, and I believe in continuously improving our public schools. I think it's what we need for our future, it's what we need for our economy, and I strongly believe that having an open and productive dialogue with our teachers is absolutely key to moving education forward. That said, I think the question was, what is my relationship with the Massachusetts Teachers Association?
Right. How would if you're elected, how would you? What impact would those donations or those mailings have in your relationship with the MTA?
Sure. And I'd like to address Dan's comments about the endorsement process for the MTA. I did meet with them months ago. I interviewed with them. I did fill out the questionnaire that Dan is referring to, and I'm certainly, again, I offer to make that available, and absolutely will. Shortly after my interview, I was contacted by the association and told that I was not going to be endorsed by their association, which was fine. Moved on from there, raised my own money, and it was only recently, in fact I hadn't been contacted at all, and the first I had heard of it was that I saw that a mailing went out. And frankly, my understanding or my assumption in why MTA has come out and decided to actively campaign on my behalf, which again I appreciate, is because of our shared interest in opposing question 1. I mean, question 1, if question 1 passes, it will again have dramatic impacts on our schools, on our educational systems. I think Dan was pretty clear in his support of question 1, and I don't blame them for wanting to support a candidate who has come out in opposition to something that will have such an impact on our schools.
That's an interesting twist, but let's be clear on what the MTA is, because that first part of the answer was straight off their website verbiage. The MTA is not a bunch of teachers sitting behind desks in our district with shiny apples. The MTA is a very hard-nosed, very political interest group, and it's an advocacy group. To say the MTA is all about quality education in the state, that has no more relation to reality than to say The toll takers union, their biggest issue is providing a safe, efficient, and cost-effective turnpike. That's just not, they advocate for their members, as they should, but the MTA opposes MCAS as a graduation requirement vehemently, opposes any sort of teacher accountability measures, opposes differential pay for teachers so that we can attract people with advanced degrees and expertise in very highly technical fields, opposes charter schools, which have provided opportunities for thousands of kids and have waiting lists thousands and thousands of kids long. In many ways, the MTA stands athwart progress in education in this state, and like I said, they're quite strict about what they ask of the people they make endorsements of and contributions to. It doesn't surprise me they didn't endorse in the primary, because there was a candidate in the primary who was heavily endorsed by all of the unions. He's gone, and now they've endorsed my current opponent, and that's fine. And that's fine. That's not wrong. My point is, she talked about transparency last time, said she would absolutely make her questionnaire available last time. That was 3 weeks before the election. Here we are a week before the election. She's saying the exact same thing. It can't just appear, it has to be produced.
Have you asked her for it?
I did, sitting at this table last time. And the news, the Metro West Daily News printed the next day that she would make it available. And it just hasn't, that's an act that has to happen.
And I think you were going to also provide a list of lobbyists who had contributed to your campaign.
And I said at the time, Carolyn, that I already provided a list of lobbyists that have contributed to me. It's called our campaign finance disclosure, which mine includes every single dollar I've raised from any source. Yours includes roughly half of the money that's been spent on your campaign. I've had 11 lobbyists contribute to my campaign. That represents, I've had close to 600 total people contribute to my campaign, individuals. So that represents roughly 2% of my contributions have come from lobbyists. And by the way, they're friends of mine. They're people I've worked with in the past. Stop, wait a second. And roughly 2% of my dollar total has come from lobbyists. Any one lobbyist is capped at $200, which is a fraction of 1% of the total amount I've raised. So if the suggestion is I'm going to be swayed by some lobbyist contribution, then I think the natural progression of that logic doesn't work very well for you, Carolyn, since you've had a reasonable estimate would say $20,000 put into your campaign by interest groups, 15 by one union. So if we're going to talk about who's going to be swayed by the people funding their campaign,